everyone, Mipa here, trying to make your Monday a little better and maybe even something to look forward to. We are here with the third and possibly final part of Live On in 3. I won't take up too much time because I think this one may be a bit longer than some of the others, so I will get right into it. Is this it? Zoo whispered to me as we stared up at the house in front of us. I nodded and we turned to Zeb. What? Zeb didn't seem to understand why we were looking at him. What do we do now? Zoo clarified. Why are you asking me? You two are the ones who wanted us to come here so badly. Zeb waved his hands at the house. You told me to come to you for answers, so here I am, looking for answers, Zoo said almost teasingly. You want me to figure out how to break us into Marco's house? Zeb tilted his head. I nodded as I saw a car go by the street behind us. Zeb looked up at the house and pointed up at the right window on the top floor near the back of the house. That's his room, right? Right! Yes, that's his room. Zoo clapped as she cheered. I nodded and started heading the direction of the window. Hey! Zeb grabbed my attached arm with both of his. You can't just go there. You might be seen. Are you dumb? He hissed. I looked down at the grass as he let go of me. Zeb, Zoo warned. What? She's the one who is about to run out. Doesn't mean you can call her dumb. You hurt her feelings again. Why are you always on her side? Because she's never given me reason not to. And I'm on your side too, but I will protect Z if I have to. Zeb stared at her, but unlike me, Zoo didn't back down. Fine. He turned away to look at the window again. He pointed again and explained. There is a drain pipe there, right next to the window. Maybe we can climb that to get up there. How will we climb with nothing to grip? We don't even have fingers, Zoo mentioned. Zeb paused to ponder the question. I started waving my arm for attention and both of them gave it to me. So I continued by patting my chest where I knew there was a round metal object. I remembered Zuri putting it in me back when I was first made. What about you? Zeb asked as he crossed his arms. I looked around before deciding the best way to explain was to show them. I waved for them to follow me, and with some urge from Zoo, Zeb agreed and followed. We ventured over to the drain pipe that scaled the back corner of the house without being seen by any humans. When we were all around the pipe, I started trying to explain again. I patted my chest again, then turned and hugged the pipe so that the magnet stuck to it. Zoo caught on first. Oh, I remember now! You have a magnet in you! Zuri used to attach you to the fridge all the time. Right, I remember. Zuri would forget you there most times. Zeb nodded. Zeb! What? It's true. It's still mean. How? It's not positive, is it? I guess not. Exactly. I looked up at how tall the pipe seemed compared to me. This seemed like a better idea in my head. Now that I was here, I realized it would still take ages to shimmy up, especially with my missing arm. It was better than nothing though, right? So I started using all my might and strength to hold onto the pipe tight enough with my legs to scooch up a smidge. What are you doing? Zeb noticed me when I'd gone up almost 2 inches. I looked up, then back at him, thinking it was obvious what I was doing. You know that'll take ages at your rate, right? Zeb clarified. I nodded and kept going. What, are we supposed to just wait here? I shrugged, then continued my journey. What will you do once you're up there? I waved to show him that's how I'd hopefully get Marco's attention. What if Marco isn't there? You don't even have both of your arms. I shrugged but didn't stop to look at him this time. Trust Z, Zeb. She'll do great. Zoo jumped in. Besides, didn't you say that humans can't hear us talk? So, Z has the most experience with nonverbal communication. It's perfect. Zeb sounded like he wanted to protest, but didn't say anything. Zoo continued to cheer me on as I slowly moved up. After some time, I finally made it. I had to very carefully slide onto the windowsill, but I made it and was happy to see he was there. But that quickly faded when I saw he was crying. He must have heard about Zuri, I realized. He had his face in his hands and his shoulders were shaking. I almost mistook it for laughter at first, although the tissues piled next to him and his sunken posture told me otherwise. I wasn't sure how to get his attention when he wasn't looking at me. He was usually a quiet crier, according to what I remembered. Would he hear me if I banged on the glass? How much sound could I really make? Would I just have to stand here and hope he looked over at his window? "Is he there?" I heard Zeb yell from below. I couldn't yell back to him, and I did not trust myself to lean over the edge to nod so he could see it. If I fell, I'd need to start all over on my journey up here, and Marco may leave his room by then. I couldn't risk it, so I ignored him. Zoo would reassure him. Hopefully. I stood at the window with my hand on the glass. Marco didn't have a window screen because a bad storm caused some branches to rip it up, and they hadn't gotten a new one yet. So if Marco would open the window, I could come right in and have him get the others from outside. I just needed him to look at me. Then I'd need to find a way to communicate without him freaking out, but I'd figure that out as I went. After waiting for a minute or two, Marco wiped away tears and seemed to be trying to recompose himself as he scooped up his tissue pile and threw them away. For a moment I worried he was going to leave his room, but instead he turned to the window. We locked eyes and he just froze. I waved to try to seem non-threatening while my thoughts screamed, "Don't freak out, don't freak out, don't freak out." Marco covered his eyes and shook his head. He muttered something to himself, but I didn't know what. He looked back up at me, his hand still covering his face. I looked down at the window and tried to motion opening the window. Marco started talking to himself and pacing the room, and when he looked back at me, he couldn't seem to believe I was there. I motioned him to open the window again, and even as his eyes teared up and he kept muttering, he came and opened the window. As the window opened, I heard his muttering. What am I, insane? Am I that affected by Zuri passing that I'm imagining her doll trying to get into my room? Why am I opening the window for it? When the window was fully opened, he stopped talking. I looked up at him and waved. He waved back after a moment of hesitating. Even then, though, it made me want to jump into him for a hug, but I had 2 other rag dolls waiting for me outside. So instead I pointed down towards Zeb and Zoo. Marco hesitated again, but looked at where I was pointing. I heard Zoo cheer. "I told you she would do it!" Marco shook his head again and whispered, "What is this? Toy Story?" He leaned away from the window and looked at me. "Are you real?" I nodded. "Am I insane?" I shook my head. "Are the other 2 of you down there?" I nodded. "Are you alive?" I nodded again. Marco sighed. Is this Zuri's voodoo stuff she was trying? I paused, wondering how he knew, but nodded. Marco put his hands together in front of his face and took a deep breath. "That was legit?" I looked down at myself, then back at him before nodding. "Wait. So you 3 are made of a soul, right?" Marco's voice shook. I nodded. "Is it Zuri's?" I looked down and out the window before nodding again. Marco nodded too, as if it was starting to sink in. "All right." He looked out the window again and wiped away more tears. "Yeah. Okay. I'm dreaming, but might as well humor it." He scooped me up and seemed to just notice my missing arm. "What happened to you? Your journey here was rough, wasn't it?" I nodded and pointed outside again. "Right. Let's get the others." Marco took me down the hall and down the stairs. My parents are at work right now, and I know they said don't open the door for anyone, but I don't think those other two count as strangers or anything, right? I nodded as he opened the door. This shouldn't take too long, so I'm sure this is probably a dream, he mumbled again as he walked around the house to see Zeb and Zoo run up to Marco. Marco! Zoo cheered and threw her arms around Marco's leg. Marco flinched but didn't move to remove Zoo. Alright, so if I remember right, we have Z, Zoo, and Zeb, right? Marco asked, and we all nodded with our names. Right. He bent over to scoop up Zeb and accepted Zoo just holding onto his leg. He brought us inside and locked the door behind him. Can you guys speak? Marco asked as he went back upstairs. I shook my head, but Zeb nodded. Marco looked back and forth at us. So, Zeb can speak, but Z can't. I tilted my head back and forth to say, kind of. Zeb, if you can speak like you say, please explain. Hold up, does he think I can speak to him? Zeb realized. That's what you told him, Z reminded him. True. Zeb sighed and shook his head at Marco. You won't explain? Marco put us on the bed. Zeb shook his head. You can't actually speak to me? Zeb nodded. Got it. Marco slumped. He looked around the room. Here. He grabbed his laptop and unlocked it. You can type, right? He turned it to us. Zeb nodded. I got this. He waltzed over to the laptop and typed. I can type. Easy. Marco nodded. Great. So, let's have a bit of a Q&A while I close up Z's arm. Speaking of, how did that happen? After about an hour or so of Zeb answering questions and Marco trying to remember sewing lessons Zuri taught him a couple of years ago, in the end, my arm was still gone, but sealed, so I stopped losing stuffing. Marco wiped his eyes again. So, Zuri's not quite gone. Zoo nodded excitedly. Marco chuckled as he packed away his sewing supplies. She just found the key to immortality, didn't she? Zoo nodded again and chuckled with him. When Marco sat on the bed with us, she hopped onto his lap. Marco smiled and scratched her ears. Zoo leaned into him as she whispered to us. No wonder Zuri cared about him so much. Now, you guys want me to take care of you? Marco asked. I nodded. Why me? Zeb started typing. Because Zoo and Z insisted since Zuri cared about you so much and loved you like a brother. So, you are the only family we have left. Marco stared at the words on the screen. Really? She did? I nodded and clapped while Zoo gave a subtle nod, seeming quite comfortable in Marco's hands. Zeb typed out an enthusiastic, "Of course!" Well, alright. Marco smiled at the three of us and scooped me and Zeb into his arms with Zoo. I'm really glad you guys are here. It makes what happened to Zuri much easier to handle because she is still here through you. We all nodded at him. Now, we may have to do this Toy Story style and have you act like normal dolls so you don't give my parents a heart attack. I'll explain it to them gently so they don't freak. It'll be fine though. Once they understand, it'll be okay. Marco held us closer and I felt safer than I had since being a ragdoll. This will be your home. And that is all I have for Live On in 3. Now, currently, it isn't part of the plan to make more parts, Although I had really no idea on how to close this off, and I feel like more of the story could be told, although I don't know how interested you guys are in the story, or if you guys would want to see more of these characters. So with where I'm at now, I had originally planned to make this a 3-parter at most, but I could do other short, funny things where it's like, oh, this happened, just as little peeks into what their life is like with Marco. I can do that if you guys want, but if not, I don't have to do that either. It's just an idea. I will put out a poll. Make sure you guys check the community posts occasionally, because I do put stuff in there occasionally. But I will be putting a post on whether to do more with Live On in 3 or not, so you can vote there. But until then, I hope you all have an amazing week, everyone. Goodbye!